I have heard that on one occasion the Blessed One was staying near Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. And on that occasion, Venerable Girimananda was diseased, in pain, severely ill. Then Venerable Ananda went to the Blessed One and, on arrival, having bowed down to him, sat to one side. As he was sitting there, he said to the Blessed One, "Lord, Venerable Girimananda is diseased, in pain, severely ill. It would be good if the Blessed One would visit him out of sympathy." Ananda, if you go to the monk Girimananda and tell him 10 perceptions, it's possible that when he hears the 10 perceptions, his disease may be allayed. Which 10? The perception of inconstancy, the perception of not self, the perception of unattractiveness, the perception of drawbacks, the perception of abandoning, the perception of dispassion, the perception of cessation, the perception of distaste for every world, the perception of the undesirability of all fabrications, and mindfulness of in and out breathing. And what is the perception of inconstancy? There is the case where a monk, having gone to the wilderness, to the shade of a tree, or to an empty building, reflects thus: form is inconstant, feeling is inconstant, perception is inconstant, fabrications are inconstant, consciousness is inconstant. Thus he remains focused on inconstancy with regard to the 5 clinging aggregates. This, Ananda, is called the perception of inconstancy. And what is the perception of not self? There is the case where a monk, having gone to the wilderness, to the shade of a tree, or to an empty building, reflects thus: the eye is not self. Forms are not self. The ear is not self. Sounds are not self. The nose is not self. Aromas are not self. The tongue is not self. Flavours are not self. The body is not self. Tactile sensations are not self. The intellect is not self. Ideas are not self. Thus he remains focused on not-selfness with regard to the 6 inner and outer sense media. This is called the perception of not-self. And what is the perception of unattractiveness? There is the case where a monk ponders this very body, from the soles of the feet on up, from the crown of the head on down, surrounded by skin, filled with all sorts of unclean things. There is in this body hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin, muscle, tendons, bones, bone marrow, spleen, heart, liver, membranes, kidneys, lungs, large intestines, small intestines, gorge, feces, gall, phlegm, lymph, blood, sweat, fat, tears, oil, saliva, mucus, oil in the joints, urine. Thus he remains focused on unattractiveness with regard to this very body. This is called the perception of unattractiveness. And what is the perception of drawbacks? There is a case where a monk, having gone to the wilderness, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty dwelling, reflects thus: this body has many pains, many drawbacks. In this body, many kinds of disease arise, such as seeing diseases, hearing diseases, nose diseases, tongue diseases, body diseases, head diseases, ear, mouth, teeth diseases, cough, asthma, catarrh, fever, aging, stomachache, fainting, dysentery, cholera, leprosy, boils, ringworm, tuberculosis, epilepsy, skin disease, itch, scab, psoriasis, scabies, jaundice, diabetes, hemorrhoids, fistulas, ulcers, diseases arising from bile, from phlegm, from the wind property, from combinations of bodily humours, from changes in the weather, from uneven care of the body, from attacks, from the result of karma, cold, heat, hunger, thirst, defecation, urination. Thus he remains focused on drawbacks with regard to this body. This is called the perception of drawbacks. And what is the perception of abandoning? There is a case where a monk doesn't acquiesce to an arisen thought of sensuality. He abandons it, dispels it, and wipes it out of existence. He doesn't acquiesce to an arisen thought of ill will. He abandons it, dispels it, and wipes it out of existence. He doesn't acquiesce to an arisen thought of harmfulness. He abandons it, dispels it, and wipes it out of existence. He doesn't acquiesce to arisen evil, unskillful mental qualities. He abandons them, dispels them, and wipes them out of existence. This is called the perception of abandoning. And what is the perception of dispassion? There is a case where a monk, having gone to the wilderness, to the shade of a tree, or to an empty building, reflects thus: "This is peace. This is exquisite. The stilling of all fabrications. The relinquishment of all acquisitions. The ending of craving. Dispassion. Unbinding." This is called the perception of dispassion. And what is the perception of cessation? There is the case where a monk, having gone to the wilderness, to the shade of a tree, or to an empty building, reflects thus: "This is peace. This is exquisite. The stilling of all fabrications. The relinquishment of all acquisitions. The ending of craving. Cessation. Unbinding." This is called the perception of cessation. And what is the perception of distaste for every world? There is a case where a monk, abandoning any attachments, clingings, fixations of awareness, biases, or obsessions with regard to any world, refrains from them and does not get involved. This is called the perception of distaste for every world. And what is the perception of the undesirability of all fabrications? There is a case where a monk feels horrified, humiliated, and disgusted with all fabrications. This is called the perception of the undesirability of all fabrications. And what is mindfulness of in and out breathing? There is the case where a monk, having gone to the wilderness, to the shade of a tree, or to an empty building, sits down folding his legs crosswise, holding his body erect, and setting mindfulness to the fore. Always mindful, he breathes in. Mindful, he breathes out. Breathing in long, he discerns. I am breathing in long. Or breathing out long, he discerns. I am breathing out long. Or breathing in short, he discerns. I am breathing in short. Or breathing out short, he discerns. I am breathing out short. He trains himself. I will breathe in sensitive to the entire body. He trains himself. I will breathe out sensitive to the entire body. He trains himself. I will breathe in calming bodily fabrication. He trains himself. I will breathe out calming bodily fabrication. He trains himself to breathe in sensitive to rapture and to breathe out sensitive to rapture. He trains himself to breathe in sensitive to pleasure and to breathe out sensitive to pleasure. He trains himself to breathe in sensitive to mental processes and to breathe out sensitive to mental processes. He trains himself to breathe in calming mental processes and to breathe out calming mental processes. He trains himself to breathe in sensitive to the mind and to breathe out sensitive to the mind. He trains himself to breathe in satisfying the mind and to breathe out satisfying the mind. He trains himself to breathe in steadying the mind and to breathe out steadying the mind. He trains himself to breathe in releasing the mind and to breathe out releasing the mind. He trains himself to breathe in focusing on inconstancy and to breathe out focusing on inconstancy. He trains himself to breathe in focusing on dispassion and to breathe out focusing on dispassion. He trains himself to breathe in focusing on cessation and to breathe out focusing on cessation. He trains himself to breathe in focusing on relinquishment and to breathe out focusing on relinquishment. This Ananda is called mindfulness of in and out breathing. Now, Ananda, if you go to the monk, Girimananda, and tell him these 10 perceptions, it's possible that when he hears these 10 perceptions, his disease may be allayed. Then Venerable Ananda, having learned these 10 perceptions in the Blessed One's presence, went to Venerable Girimananda and told them to him. As Venerable Girimananda heard these 10 perceptions, his disease was allayed, and he recovered from his disease. That was how Venerable Girimananda's disease was abandoned.